Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki and I represent the Windham-4 District of Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster. Today is one of those single topic shows where something that's been a hot topic in the old town tonight is something we're going to focus on for the entire program. That topic is Act 46. Act 46 was passed a couple of years ago. It's a bill which requires the change in governance for school districts across the state. The hope is that that consolidation of governance will result in what's called greater equity, although I'm still not sure what those parameters are to define equity, and that it would result in savings. What we have seen is a dynamic that's forced the state to look at this, and that's we've had declining enrollments of students for over 10 years now. Along with that, there's concern that even though student populations are declining, costs continue to rise. This piece of legislation, I don't doubt, is well-meaning, but I didn't vote for it, and I want to be upfront with you about that. I still think it needed more time. I still think it needs more time, and I believe the local processes need more time. One of the concerns I've had for years is that there's a cohort of students that continues to struggle. Our schools are doing a great job for the most part, and as we saw in December when the most recent achievements listings came out for Vermont, our students are doing well, but there's still that cohort that struggles, what we've called the achievement gap or the performance gap. Up until 4 years or so ago, that was the focus. It was the focus of people in the legislature, the focus of how we can improve our system more, and unfortunately that seems to have been taken off the table. The idea that governance or changing governance structures in our educational system is going to be the panacea for what ails the system. I'm still not sold on, and apparently because of the difficult nature and the complicated nature of the different towns that make up our supervisory unions and different town districts, there's a lot of people that feel that way as well. Today we have two people from Windham County who are part of a group that I think has been identifying as Save Our Schools. Julie Forsythe from Putney and Kristina Naylor from Dummerston. Welcome and thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thanks for having us, Mike.
Yeah. Julie, if you could start, could you introduce yourself a little bit to the people who are watching and your place in the community, your role in education?
Oh, that's wonderful, Mike. I've been around long enough that could be a fairly long answer, so I'll try and be to the point. I was in education, teaching, for about 25 years, but I'm actually not coming at this as a critic of our school systems. It's really not that at all. The reason I was so sparked by this movement, if you will, to really look at what Act 46 was really asking of us, came about, I think, last summer. And it's because I now, in retirement, am a community activist doing a lot of work with seniors, believe it or not. And one of the things in Putney that we've worked hard on is to really keep our seniors engaged and aware of what's going on with kids in our schools. And I really care about that. I feel like vital community schools need vital communities to participate. And as I began reading and thinking about Act 46 and how we would lose a town meeting at which the seniors could hear what was going on, be actively engaged, and really take an important part in determining budgets, all that kind of stuff, that if we lost that connection, that was going to be a real divider for us. It would divide our community from itself in a way that was not going to be healthy. And as I followed, I haven't seen anything that's changed my mind. In fact, the more I learn, the more I feel that it's not going to make our community healthier. if we really go along with the consolidation plan that's being proposed in the form that it's being proposed. And this is not to say that I don't think our study committee has worked very hard. I think it has. But I think there's some really important points that just haven't been considered. And that when we bring them up, it's very hard to feel that anyone is really listening. And it's very frustrating, as you know.
Mm-hmm. So, Kristina, you've also have different involvements in the community, but part of your background is in education as well. Can you share a little bit about that?
That's true. I started my career working in the Boston area in the biotech world and lived through consolidations. I counted the other day, 10 consolidations in 13 years. So I'm used to mergers and consolidations from in a previous scenario. After about my 10th consolidation and merger, I decided that mergers were not great for small business. Left the business world and got my degree in education and taught for 5 years 7th grade middle school science in Greenfield, a little bit south of here, and in a school with very high levels of poverty. So I think we were at 60% poverty when I taught there. So I share your concern about students living in poverty and have worked with those students. The birth of my second child, I left teaching. My husband and I own a small business, so between having 2 small children and a small business, I did not have the time to put to education. But a couple years ago, I had enough time in my schedule and felt very committed to giving back to the school in Dummerston, where my children my daughter's graduating 8th grade this year, my son's in 7th grade, and felt very committed to giving back to the school because my children have had a wonderful experience there.
Yeah.
So joined the school board and joined the Act 46 study committee as well. So I've been serving on that for the last year and a half.
Yeah. From your understanding of Act 46, what do you see as benefits or the shortcomings?
The benefits have been the opportunity to have a conversation and share information with other dedicated school board members in our WSESU, which I don't think happened as much as it should have, and that is a really good, positive experience. I think Act 46 and the legislature in funding the Picus-Oden study that helps school boards understand how they're spending money and what is efficient based on the current research has been incredibly helpful. And I know that's not Act 46, but I think it goes hand in hand. And I think that was a great idea to fund that study. The shortcomings have been the time frame has been very fast. I think the incentives got people off the target of really having a conversation with our community, with our towns, to find out what is vital to our community. And I think the other shortcoming has been that we're forced to do it very quickly in a very narrow frame. And I think there's many synergies that Dummerston and Putney could have, but we haven't been able to have that conversation at all.
Yeah. Is one of the concerns that I have, as I understand the law now, is once these agreements are made, that's it. There's not an exit ramp currently, and it's one of the things that I have proposed along with other legislators. Relationships sometimes don't work out, and we have divorce laws that recognize that reality, and I think the possibility that things can change, the makeups of town can change, makeup of boards can change, and to not have that kind of flexibility, I think is mistaken. The other thing that I signed on to as a co-sponsor is a bill which would allow or specify to allow more flexibility in alternative governance structures. Many of us felt the original bill had that flexibility, but unfortunately what we saw was that the Agency of Education and the State Board was not allowing the kind of flexibility that the law wanted, and that's why I signed on to a bill. The chief sponsor is Representative Janet Ansell, who was a supporter of Act 46, who voted for it, but found it was distressing enough to see how it was being implemented that she thought to sponsor this bill. And Janet comes from a legal standpoint, while she is the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, she's also a lawyer. She was in Howard Dean's administration as his chief counsel. She's headed up the tax department, and now she's in the legislature. So she has not to speak for her, but I think her sense of this is, when we make a law, we put an intention to it, and it should be followed that way, and we found it wasn't happening. And that happens in other laws as well. It's not just in this situation, and that's why there should be a process for us. When you look at the template that's being put out there, what would be a better way to go about this?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that one of the things I've been struck by in all of this is that there are so many ways in which we could cooperate.
Yeah.
And we need to cooperate. There's no doubt about it. We're really facing a crisis, right? Our numbers really are dropping. Nobody's arguing with that. And as I looked at the proposal that came out from our study group, there were some really marvelous ideas in there, but I found myself asking over and over again, and why do we need to do this consolidation to have these agreements? There's no other way we could cooperate to see that our kids could move from one school to there? Wait a second. We do it with a career center. I mean, so that question just keeps coming up for me, and it doesn't go away. And another thing that I really feel is that when we look at the question of who's going to be engaged in the school, if we reduce the number of people who are engaged actively and responsibly in Putney Central or Dummerston or any other school, where is the activity, the voice? I mean, we all know that the things we care about are the things we're taking responsibility for. And if we're taking less responsibility, that means there's less engagement. And I think I said that before, but in a different way. In this particular case, it's about governance.
Yeah.
Our votes now mean less. You know, if you think about how actively people are or are not engaged in the high school,
Yeah.
Not so much.
Yeah.
If it's about the community school, very engaged. So I think that's the real heart of my argument. And when I asked about that at one of the local reporting out sessions of the study committee, I know that they had heard that complaint, but the response was to set up a council within the school that was not elected by the town and that also had no real responsibility. And I thought, well, why would I serve on that committee? What would draw me to do that?
Yeah.
So I feel like that key issue has really not been resolved. And I think there's so much we can do to cooperate and need to do. But I don't feel that it has to be done by letting go of control.
Yeah.
I think as the law was written, and I read the law before I joined the Act 46 committee, there appears to be room to make your justification to the State Board of Education and say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to do better, as every school should be looking at how to do better. I don't think there's a person I've met on a school board that doesn't want to do better for their students, but to make a formal case and to really look at it through the lens of equity, whatever that means, but equity of opportunity and equity for how you're serving students that struggle to do well in school.
Yeah.
And to make the point that this is what we're planning to do, and do that backed with the numbers that, an evidence-based approach.
Yeah.
It seems like the Act 46 allowed that. I think that's what the legislature voted for. And they're laudable goals, and I think towns should be allowed, towns that are performing well and have ideas and people committed to helping their towns do better should be given that opportunity. Because Vermont doesn't exist, Vermont's a small state. We're not and we exist on people doing things a little bit differently throughout the state. And so if we want it to be vanilla, we lose the opportunity to do better. We won't have a Grafton cheese, we'll have Kraft.
Yeah.
And I think that we're gonna really throw the baby out with the bathwater and lose opportunities for innovation in our state, which is what we do well here.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say about this, I think, is as we look around the state at how many towns and school districts are having a very tough time,
Yeah.
that's pretty immediate evidence
Yeah.
that we need to do something different. at the very least, take more time and look at other ways of implementing. I think, as you said before, when the law was written, exactly as you said, it was written with a much broader understanding of how it would be implemented. And that as things were turned into rules, that fell away. I mean, that in itself is a reason why we don't want more bureaucracy, right? We want more cooperation, not more centralized bureaucracy.
That consolidation of power is something Vermonters have been leery about, and the trend in the state and nationally has been to that, to take control away from the local areas, and the governor's most recent budget is a glaring example of that, where if he had his way, he would be judge and jury for whatever every school district in the state did, including doing away with town meetings, pushing the votes to May, controlling budgeting, without allowance for if your roof collapses. It's a pretty draconian power grab, if you ask me, and it's from my perspective, it's not the Vermont way. It's not what attracted me to come or stay, and that local control is an essential part of what makes Vermont unique. We'll have
That's the roof falling in.
Yeah, there's the roof going. Vermonters are used to having a voice. They're used to having a vote. I'm going to do that again. Vermonters are used to having a voice and a vote. And from what I see, this takes it away. Town meeting is not going to be town meeting as it is.
Do you think people really understand that?
I don't.
My big question about Act 46 is it clear to people that if we agree to this study plan, that we will no longer own our school, we will not own our school property. You'll notice in Putney the movement to secure the school forest and get
Thank
it out
goodness.
is happening very quickly, right? Well, that's for a reason.
Yeah.
That our vote will be one representative from Putney, perhaps another if we have another at-large member.
Yeah.
Do people really understand this? It seems like it's the piece that never is really getting discussed somehow.
We just went through an election, and I had a contested race, so I was out talking to voters, and I was really astounded how few people, especially in Putney and Dummerston. What's interesting is in Westminster West, this has been a hot issue for a couple of years now because of the West-West school. And I can say what happened, I think 2 years ago at town meeting. Westminster usually gets 150, 200 people at their town meeting. When this became a front burner issue, I think over 400 people showed up at town meeting. And my hope is we can engender that kind of participation now. I think we're trying to have these discussions at both of our town meetings. For the most part, when I told people about my perspective on this, I suggested you should find out about this because this has serious repercussions for how things are now. Most of the people were very interested in finding out more about this because it didn't sound good. And I know it's sometimes hard to get the word out. We don't have, in this postmodern world, we all get our information from lots of different places. There's not one blanket way where you can say this is how you get information. And that makes it difficult. But another reason I would hope we could take more time to get people more informed about this. You mentioned the decision-making process. And I mentioned that in many ways you could look at these decisions as irrevocable. Recently, I couldn't help but notice a similar situation happened where there had been a consolidated waste management district here. Brattleboro had a weighted vote. I think they had 6 votes on that. And the result of that being our county is no longer going to have a county-wide recycling program. And Brattleboro's 6 votes pushed that vote into the let's close this down. For those who say it can't happen here, I think there's a good example of how we need to be careful. We understand that when we hook up with Brattleboro, the demographics are clear. That's a bigger town. Are we willing to put our hands, fate in their hands, though? I don't doubt the people who are on that board now share our concerns. Boards change fast, though. And I can tell you, my perspective around the state is there are school boards now around the state that are dominated by people whose clear priority is to save taxpayer money. It's not educating our kids. It's about cutting taxes. And it wouldn't take a big shift for Brattleboro's board to go in that direction as well. And it's one of the reasons I'm suggesting people get involved at every level here. What are your thoughts on
Yeah, I think
that aspect of governance?
Been a big concern for the small towns, and should Vernon be allowed to leave the supervisory union, which is still in contention, it does give one less small town voice as opposed to the solid waste district. So we've lost that small town voice. So things like school closure, that's not a vote of the town that decides that. That was not acceptable to the study committee, which is similar to a future super board, is heavily weighted to Brattleboro. It's not even a unanimous vote of a super board in the future. It's 7 out of 9 people have to vote to close a school. And that's the criteria which somebody might use in the future is not laid out. So it's whatever criteria a future super board would use. If it was going to be the people that I've served with on the study committee for the rest of eternity, I'd sign on tomorrow, because I know those people. They care about kids. They would be thoughtful about small outlying schools and the time that children might have to sit on a school bus. But I don't think any of them are willing to take, an eternity pledge to serve on a super board, and I don't think democracy would allow that. So if things change, and I think we've seen things change in our country, if things changed on a local level and tax dollars became an overriding influence in Brattleboro to reduce taxes, I don't think we can guarantee that the super board in the future would be the people that are on the study committee now.
Yeah.
I feel so strongly about that because I have such incredible respect for the people who are on the study committee, and I feel so incredibly awkward being opposed to this outcome. This is not a position I like to be in. But I think it's inevitable that the next board, will not share, will not have. They won't have done the work together, for example, that your committee has done. It's inevitable that they're going to be driven by very, very different factors. And when that is the case, Putney is going to be left in a very horrible position, as is Dummerston, as is Burlington, as is Guilford. And I just feel like I need to speak up about this now.
Yeah.
I feel like it's really important.
Yeah.
And I think without an exit clause, I've called the Vermont statutes on getting out of a union, the Hotel California.
Yeah.
You can vote to check out any time, but you can never leave.
Yeah.
And I think without those exit clauses, and I think we're seeing how hard it is and how much time and effort has been spent trying to get Vernon to be allowed to leave the union, as to how easy that might be in the future.
Yeah.
In a unified union, when all the structures are consolidated, it will be even harder than this withdrawal is, because there's not a separate structure, there's not a local school board at all to take over. You'd have to do everything from scratch.
Yeah.
And that's been the experience in Maine, I think. Isn't that what we're hearing? That in a state where this has already happened, the fact that there are no exit clauses is an enormous problem. And it's also very interesting that they haven't had the financial benefits.
And that's another concern. My understanding is that the primary force behind this is to cut property taxes. I get that. especially as people age and their income becomes more fixed, it's a real concern. We're in an economy where it's only in the last couple of years out of the past 10 that real income has risen. People's wages have been stagnant and taxes haven't. I get that piece. What we're seeing, though, is the real tax savings are not materializing. We heard some reports from different supervisory unions last week in the in our county delegation. The people from Twinfield wrote, or was it Twin Valley? The Wilmington,
Twin Valley.
Whitington, Twin Valley. They merged, is it 5 years ago now? And it just, far from saving, it has, the sense is it has cost them more money. If that's the reason we're doing this, if that's the reason we're bringing this upset to our communities, I have a feeling people are going to be sorely disappointed. As mergers go around the state, what I'm seeing are savings of 1, maybe 2% in a budget. These are not the savings that people hoped for or would make an endeavor like this worthwhile. And I would caution people, first of all, with those incentives, because what I've been told by the Secretary of Education herself is those incentives were not to be tax relief. They were to cover the costs of merger. And the sense was, to be fair, there were going to be costs to this, and they didn't want to add an extra burden. That's what they were there for. And I'm cautious when people talk about saving money and how much this is going to save, because it's the rare instance across the board where it turns into the savings we hope it can be. Which brings me back to children, and I hope, I understand there's this sense that people want equity for our children, and who doesn't? Again, our schools are performing pretty well here. We want constant improvement to be happening. I'm not sure how changing governance makes that happen.
I'd like to take issue with your comment, our schools are doing pretty well here.
Yeah.
Because in speaking with someone recently, they said, well, we're doing great in comparison to the United States, but compared internationally, we stink. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has done a report called Leaders and Laggards. Vermont ranks 4th internationally. We're like right around Finland, one of the top leaders. We rank, if you took Vermont out and looked at our scores and what we're doing here in Vermont,
Yeah.
we are a leader. We're 3rd in the nation on
And
the
have
leaders,
been
and have
consistently.
been. And so
This wasn't a one-year fluke.
this idea that we're not providing an education, there are issues we can do better.
Yeah.
But the idea that taxpayers are being told, the outgoing SBA president, oh, we're lagging behind internationally. Yes, the U.S. is lagging behind internationally, but when you look at what Vermont's doing, when you look at what Massachusetts is doing, we are not lagging behind. We are preparing ourselves. We have a grade A for international preparedness. The Education Week Quality Counts, this is one of the top schools in the nation. So I think we're doing very well by our students, and there is a cost. We have to understand that to educate our children, there is a cost to that. You can't be competitive internationally and not fund education. So I think it's really important that we remind people we have something to be proud of, and we are producing students that are prepared for the 21st century.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And it reminds me that education is an investment. It's a wonderful investment in our future. As I tell people regularly, the children of today will be taking my blood pressure tomorrow, and I want them to be able to do it accurately. The bigger issue, I think, and I mentioned it before, has been flat income. When your income is flat for 10 years, any bump is going to hurt. If you're on fixed income already in retirement, it's going to hurt. We're getting good value for our education. I agree, our outcomes are good. I'll go back to that performance gap that we have for a certain cohort of students, and I still want to get back to that focus. But our schools are doing well. It's expensive, and I think it's a worthwhile investment. Whether we can control costs or not, we should try where we can.
I'm always nervous about an argument about education, a financial argument about education, which excludes its environment.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I can't ask about education without asking about jobs,
Yeah.
without asking about housing.
Yeah.
And I know when I was working in Saxon's River, where economic issues in Bellows Falls really impacted that district. And then you look at the education report and look at the number of unemployed in that same area and, just go right down the list. It didn't seem quite so surprising that a lot of kids in our school were having a very challenging time.
Yeah.
So it seemed to me it was wrong-headed to just look at schools. And I'm sure you would agree, Mike, because you have a wide view of things.
Yeah.
But I think we need to remember that we are serving well. It's still important to think about what those kids who aren't doing well need. But I think we need to, I'm speaking as a community person now because I can. It's important to think about that in a large way. It's why I'm so happy that Windham Windsor Housing Trust is going to be developing housing in Putney. I think that's going to be incredibly important for our schools.
Yeah.
And so it isn't ever just one piece.
Yeah.
That was off the track, but I just think we need to think more broadly.
Yeah. I think it was right in the track that I was going to, where there are other pressures, other sources of frustration that are getting dumped on our schools right now. And the costs might not be looked at as extravagant or exorbitant in some places if the level of pay had been increasing across the board. Of course, we see the 1% across the country. Vermont doesn't really have a 1%, so it's a little different here. But people have been struggling. That's clear. That economic discomfort, though, is not the fault of our schools. And I hope we can separate those two things. We've only got a few minutes left, and I wonder what's happening next in terms, there's a vote in Vernon or around the Vernon.
There's a vote in Dummerston, around the Vernon withdrawal.
That's right.
We're having an information meeting on the 13th of February,
Yep.
Monday, and the vote will be the 21st,
Yep.
which is unfortunately school vacation. So get your absentee ballot if you're on school vacation.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. I think things are up in the
Yeah.
air. But I would like to go back to talk about what we could do
Sure.
more effectively and what we could do for our children. And the Picus-Oden study that the legislature funded, they identify 10 ways
Yeah.
which you can improve schools. They identify cost savings. They identified $164 million worth of savings that they thought Vermont could find. $140 million was within special education and trying to do that differently. We might not be able to make that money, but it strikes me as a small business person that if 90% of the costs lay in something, we really look at that.
Yeah.
We've consolidated that. Our bill is going up in Dummerston next year for special ed, but let's look at and see what we can do to fix those things. Let's do earlier interventions.
Yeah.
In Dummerston, even though we actually not only level funded our budget for next year, but it actually is going down a little bit.
Yeah.
But we actually want to look at funding a pre-K in the school.
Yeah.
That's good money spent,
Yeah.
and having a good quality pre-K situation for children is good for children. And so I think we need to look at those things that research has identified as good for our kids. Nowhere have I found a good study that convinces me that governance is the solution to struggling children,
Yeah.
or that governance is a major driver of cost savings.
Yeah.
It's not. We all need to sharpen our pencils and work hard as school board members to make sure we're spending money effectively for a taxpayer.
Those good points, and I'm glad you brought up the Picus report, because it reminds me of a previous report the Picus group did on whether the Brigham decision achieved the kind of equity we had hoped it would. And without a doubt, that report said we have.
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure how equity is being defined now, but within the realm that the Brigham decision defined, the PICUS group determined in its study that we have achieved equity here. It's a good point that they have another study that they've done, and we would do well to take a good look at that and see if maybe we could address the cost drivers in that way. In Putney, we've got
February
something.
27th,
The 27th, there's a meeting at.
7 p.m. at the public library.
Yeah.
And the, why am I blanking out here? Can we start this again?
Sure. There's something coming up in Putney.
Yes, on February 27th, which is, I don't know what night of the week.
It's a Monday.
Monday, oh, it must be, because you, Mike, are going to come and speak to us
And listen.
and to the community, and we're inviting the community at large to come and get
Yeah.
informed. It's really important for people to really lean in now and try and understand what's going on. And we really invite people to come. We invite people to come with their questions, and you'll be there to really help us understand what's happening, what's what in the legislature, and what we can do.
Sure.
Other than vote yay or nay.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for this, and it's tied in with the group Save Our Schools, who are concerned that this is going to lead to school closings. I think it's clear from the governor's most recent budget, when his spokesperson was asked, your proposal is going to close schools and cut hundreds of jobs, and they said yes. It's one of the reasons the legislature is not going for it, because I don't think that's the way to go. Again, there's other ways to look at these cost drivers, but there's a real concern that schools will close because of this. And from one perspective, I talked to someone in the legislature who was a realtor, said there was a small town in central Vermont where this happened, and they can't get anybody to look at houses in that town now.
And that's not just that one example.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a statistic that's
Yeah.
just universally true.
That's
good,
true.
Good schools make for good communities where people want to come and have businesses.
You bet.
And
Yeah. And what we're hoping for is a more open, freewheeling discussion instead of a limited, controlled discussion. And we invite people to come, again, to the Putney Library. It's going to be February 27th, 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
And all are welcome. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having us,
I
Mike.
appreciate this is one of those concerns that could probably take a lot more of our time.
Yes, well, it has.
But you bet. So thank you for all the work you've done over the years in our communities, your time in education, and for taking time now. Thanks again to the people at BCTV for helping us bring these kinds of concerns to you at home. And until next time, this is Representative Mike Mrowicki. Bye-bye now.